Hello, Simone. Today we are going to go into an interesting deep dive to learn more about dating in the Old West. We are going to look at the widely practiced concept of mail order brides in the Old West, talked about why people opted into it, why they did it, review a lot of firsthand accounts of what men were looking for back then and what women were looking for to understand what they valued in a partner and how that has changed in society. Because I think that's something to go back to, like different cultural periods, to one, better understand our own ancestry, because I think a lot of Americans have forgotten what their great grandparents valued, what they were looking for in partners, etc. And we through seeing different cultures, we can be like, oh, this is a different way to relate to marriage and sexuality. And a lot of people would ask, they'd be like, really? Like, women would do this. They would like get in a carriage and like drive out to meet with someone in the middle of nowhere in like the Old West. Like, weren't they afraid of like being turned into like a sex slave and like chained up in the basement or something? And it's like, well, actually, there wasn't that much risk of that, because that was sort of like a strictly like worse value proposition for a guy than a wife. Sex slaves are very high maintenance, especially if
Yeah.
you're living on the frontier.
Yeah, they're
Like,
not doing that much work, which is, I mean, I guess you could force them to work. There was like that tragic story recently of the, well, now man, but who had been trapped in his house for a long period of time, and he was occasionally let out to clean the house. So he did do some housework, but then
yeah,
otherwise he was
but
locked
that's
in his room.
strictly less. Like, even if they were just cleaning the house, that's strictly less than you can get out of a dedicated wife who, like, you dedicated part of your time to, right? You know, like, you get a lot more labor out of her just by being nice. So we'll get to like the dynamics of this. Although there was an instance where a woman did get married to a nice guy, only to realize shortly after her wedding, and we'll go into this case in a bit, that he had robbed her stagecoach on the way over, not knowing it was his future wife, and he was just on the lowdown also a stagecoach robber.
Oh, oops.
Well, he was nice about it too. He didn't know it was going to be his future wife, and he let her keep her wedding outfit and everything.
Oh,
And
that's,
you know,
she was, oh, I'm going to get married. And then he's
yeah,
like,
he's
oh,
like, I can just imagine his face when she arrives, like, oh, uh-oh,
wow.
uh-oh.
What a start, huh? That's,
Yeah.
that's
But
a
before we
really
get into all of
interesting.
that, I want to go into some other crazy stuff I learned about marriage in the Old West. So we're going
Okay.
to start with Arbuckle's Coffee Coupons and Rings. In late 1800s, Arbuckle's Coffee was a dominant brand across the American frontier, especially among cowboys, homesteaders, and miners. Coffee was a staple, and Arbuckle stood out by including redeemable coupons or premiums in their 3-pound bags. These weren't just throwaways, think of them as loyalty points. Customers collected them to trade for goods like kitchenware, razors, and notably finger rings. The rings, often simple bands or modestly adorned, were marketed as keepsakes or engagement symbols. The claim of 80,000 weddings a year was one of their things. So basically,
Oh,
the Old West, there was a common practice of you would buy. Now, the reason this brand of coffee became popular amongst the Old West first is they built a way to seal it so it stayed fresh longer so they could ship it further. And so then the next thing they did is they built a system where you would get like this coupon book that you could use to buy things. But one of the most popular items in the coupon book was wedding rings. And so people would save up for various wedding rings that they would buy with coupons.
that is that another. I mean, that makes sense. It sounds honestly like buying a wedding ring with your credit card points today, which a lot of people do. I bet if I
So
log on to our credit card rewards, I will find ways to buy a ring, which I won't do
yeah, maybe.
because
Yeah.
we spend all our
It
points
says
on
here,
cruises.
never one to rest on his laurels, Arbuckle next came up with a voucher plan. He printed a coupon bearing his signature on each package. A given number of coupons would earn the bearer one of 100 items available in Arbuckle's catalog, the wish list book of its day. Items included everything from a toothbrush to a double action revolver. A young
Oh,
man could even order a golden wedding ring for his lady love.
his
Um,
lady love.
I love that you could be
Oh,
killed by a gun that somebody got with coupons in the Old West. Not only was the coffee a lifesaver to those early Westerners, so was the packaging. Coffee was shipped with sturdy Maine fur crates, 100-pound bags to the lot. The crates were used to make furniture, coffins, and cradles. The Navajo Indians even used the wood to make hogans and trademark flying angel that embezzled each package of coffee adorned many a Western Christmas tree.
oh my gosh. That
Very
is
interesting,
so
right?
cool. I love that.
I thought you'd get excited about this. I was like, that's a cool little anecdote. I'm moving that right to the beginning.
Yeah, hold on. I want to see if I can find pictures of these books.
I could find pictures of the books, but not the rings.
Well, I mean, I imagine the rings looked pretty
Nondescript.
Yeah.
Like just a gold band. Yeah, that's my guess. So a common courting custom in the Old West was something called courting mirrors. Courting mirrors were another quirky tradition, more common in rural America, including the Old West during the 1800s. They were small handheld mirrors, often 4 to 8 inches long, with wooden or metal frames, sometimes carved or painted with simple designs like hearts or flowers.
Oh.
A suitor gifted one to a woman he was courting. And it wasn't just about vanity. Mirrors were pricey and were rare on the frontier where glass was a luxury. Giving one signaled thoughtfulness and investment, like gifting a high-end gadget today. The mirror had symbolic weight too. It was intimate, a personal item tied to appearance and identity, suggesting trust and admiration. Some stories claim that women used them to quote-unquote reflect on their suitor's intentions, although that likely was romanticized folklore. Practically, a mirror was useful for a woman living in a sod house or cabin with few possessions. In some cases, couples exchanged mirrors, with the man keeping a smaller one as a memento, reinforcing mutual commitment. That's sweet. They both would bring a mirror and the man would just keep whichever one happened to be smaller.
Sweet.
These mirrors weren't mass produced like Arbuckle's rings. They were often handmade or bought from peddlers, making each one unique. By the 1880s, catalog companies like Sears began offering cheap versions, but earlier a mirror might cost a day's wages, serious for a farmhand or cowboy. Their popularity waned by the 1900s as manufactured goods flooded markets, but they left a mark in diaries and family heirlooms, often passed down as, quote, the mirror he gave her, end quote.
That's so also sweet. And yes, I checked, and 100% we could buy a wedding ring with credit card points. Even on Etsy, you can now like convert credit card points to an Etsy gift card. So
well, I love it, and I love this mirror idea. It's actually really sweet. That one of your only possessions,
a keepsake thing, and practical. I love this mixture of practicality and romance.
Well, and tied to your identity, symbolic. I should give
also
you a
like
mirror.
Take care of yourself, like girl.
Like a vacuum, like
you look rough. Here's the evidence. A mirror.
But and it's important to understand how little people owned back then. When we were going back through my family diaries of that time, and it was like my great-great-grandfather talking about being raised. And the episode is called "People Used to Like Their Parents." It's a really good episode. I think one of the best we've ever done because it was going over his diaries. And at one point, he catalogs everything he owns, and everything he owns was like a dirt roof shed that they slept in, an outhouse, and then a weaving loom, and apparently some pigs. And that was it.
I mean, looms are useful too. That all sounds good.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me that today, like, if you thought about making a catalog of everything that your family owns, it would not be like a 4-thing catalog. It's not like, well, we've got some pigs, and I've got a loom and an outhouse.
Well, and in just a few years, you'd buy a house on a catalog. So I don't know. Catalogs really saw this amazing. Catalogs were the pre-internet internet.
Yeah, like Sears. You know, you can, in my hometown of Dallas, you can drive around, and some of the old Sears houses that were bought from a catalog are still standing in neighborhoods that I lived in.
Yeah, and they're nice houses too. Like I've seen YouTube tours of them. They're well built, classic design. They look a lot better than modern builds and McMansions on average.
Yeah. So if people are wondering, okay, I'll go into the story now of mail order brides.
Yes.
The story of the famous mail order brides of the Old West began when the gold rush brought men over the Rocky Mountains to new mining communities.
Oh.
Only a few prospectors struck it rich, but many young men stayed in the West, mining, ranching, farming, hunting, or opening businesses. As towns began to grow, these men wanted wives to create families and to build more stable, lasting communities in the Western territories. Men outnumbered women drastically, sometimes by as many as 9 to 1. Not good odds. The obvious answer was single women from the East willing to start new lives. And this wasn't just a phenomenon in the Old West. It was also a phenomenon in Australia. So here are some Australian ones, because, you had the men in the outback farming and stuff trying to bring women out. And they're really interesting to analyze because you get an idea of what a man valued in a partner back then. Like when he's out and he's like, I want a woman that meet these criteria. This is what he's thinking. And keep in mind how this would work. He would like go to the telegraph office and you'd be like, I want to contact one of these magazines or newspapers out east or in one of the major cities in Australia. And I want to write to them like descriptions of what I'd want in a wife. And okay, so and you also
Because
got to think,
it was more like singles ads. I mean, it was kind of male. It was long distance singles
yeah.
ads.
And you've also got to think when you're hearing this, what it says about like how they're trying to sell themselves to the woman as well, like their understanding of what the woman values. Okay, so this one, matrimonial. Two young men aged 31 and 25 wish to correspond with young ladies with a view to matrimony. Photos exchanged if necessary. Ladies must be able to read and write and capable of conducting a store on goldfields if required. So what's really interesting in this is first, like, they don't care that much what they look like. It's like, okay, if you
Photos
need to,
optional. I'm a
we'll
little
do photos.
confused by two men together looking.
No, they're okay. So they both want basically the same thing, a competent woman, right? And so they're like, well, let's just pool on the ad, because we both want a woman who's like good at accounting and business.
I'm just
like
picturing this really cute gay couple that's like, we just need wives.
beards. No. You see that pretty frequently in these. Is that people will
just
pull
going in together.
Yeah, they're like, well, let's just go in together and we'll look at the correspondence and see which ones we like. And then what's also really interesting here, and we've noted this before, and like people don't believe us, we're like, women historically were expected to work in the family business. This is what a corporate family was. The idea of a nuclear family where a woman stayed at home and did nothing does not represent what your ancestors were doing.
You were getting a business partner. These were more ads for business partners for sure.
Except for a very short time from the 1910s to like the 1970s. So if you go back to the Old West, listen to what the one qualification they want in a woman. Ladies must be able to read and write and be capable of conducting a store on a gold field if necessary. I.e., you need to be able to run a business. That's what I need you for. I'll do like the gold panning and stuff like that, and you run the store. Like that's the way it often worked, which is really interesting in understanding what was expected from gender dynamics in a relationship. And also, what you'll see in a lot of these is women were expected to manage the finances. So here's another one. Matrimony. A young man about 24 years of age of respectable connections having an income of about 120 pounds per annum wishes to obtain an introduction to a lady about 19 or 20, agreeable in person and capable of looking after domestic affairs. Property, no object.
Okay.
So again, what he's saying here is he's not asking about looks. He's saying, I need a woman who can look after my financial affairs, which is really fascinating. But I think it's also signaling to the woman, like what type of guys these are as well. Like this is part of a two-part signaling. This is, look, I'm a respectable guy and, you come, you meet with me and we'll start a business together and we'll build something that matters together, right? It's not like, hey, I'm looking for a hoochie mama, Any thoughts on that before I go further?
We need to get back to this.
Okay.
But this does, what I'm thinking already when I hear this is there's this phenomenon within the rationalist or EA community online whereby some people will post marriage bounties and they're just like way too wordy versions of this. And when I compare these succinct ads with the marriage bounty descriptions, I'm really seeing the difference between why people were able to get married back then when being practical and why practical, logical people today can't.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, they're paying for the letter on these, but
I know, but no, my point though is like these people worked out to like, what do I really need? Someone who owns property and can, or like someone who's practical and not crazy and can help out domestically around the house, doesn't have to be a supermodel. Whereas when I go through some of these marriage bounties that people describe, it's like long documents and like, I'm an INTJ and I'm looking for someone with like, they're being completely unreasonable about what they want. And they also are being way too wide.
But I think it's unfair to just point this out with the EA community. It was in our own fan base. We'll talk to people and they're like, I want like a hot woman and I'll get a hotter woman and like, I'll go to Latin America and find a hot wife, and it's like, no, you shouldn't even be caring about that. Like, you should be focused on their, like when I met you, your attractiveness was I think very obvious to me of little concern. I was much more interested in your industriousness and your breadth of knowledge and curiosity to learn new things. That was like my criteria. Like, It was not big, but I wanted someone who's world class at those things, which I think, why our relationship has gone so well. But to go to
Whereas,
the next,
there's other, like, when I look at other ads, and this is from later periods. So you're talking around the gold rush around 1849 to 1856, I imagine, all the way up until like the 1920s. People were still that practical. Like, there's a Pittsburgh Press 1921 ad that just reads, "I'm 27, employed by the government, have a small but reasonable salary, will make some poor working girl from 18 to 25 a good husband and a happy home. Must be Protestant. No dancers, flirts, or streetwalkers need answer.
I had that
Object
one. I was going to
matrimony."
do this one. I thought this was a good one.
It's
No
so good.
dancers
It's
or
so
flirt.
good.
No, but
No
it's
flirt.
always. I want a woman of strong moral character,
Uh-huh.
and not even. No, he doesn't. He's not even here like, oh, you can't have never slept with someone before. You can't have
Yeah,
never.
just like, don't by your character be someone who's addicted to that. That's it. He's being reasonable.
Yeah, he cares about like religious, ideological compatibility. That makes perfect sense. I actually really don't understand how interfaith marriages work.
Yeah, and that's the thing is it and you don't have to say this in so many words. And I think when you say it in too many words, then you're losing people.
And you see
it's,
his aspiration here is to be a good husband to someone.
yeah, he's explaining right up front, I'm a man of modest means, right? Like, I'm not a sugar daddy, I'm not a wealthy man. But if you're poor and you want a decent, stable life, I'm your guy.
Yeah.
That's
So,
great.
Here's one. The respectable man desirous of forming a matrimonial alliance with a young and respectable female. But I love that line instead of a wedding, a matrimonial alliance. That
sounds good. That sounds prestigious. Sign me up for that. Maybe people will go for it more if it's a matrimonial alliance and not a marriage.
Oh, hello. Sorry, it's somebody from the New York Times. I'm happy to take your call. It's just a fact checker from the New York Times.
Okay.
So she's going to call back. She's got something else going on. But I think that we should view marriages that way, as matrimonial alliances. That's like a really powerful way, much more so than like a matrimonial submission. And this is when people are like, oh, in the old days, women submitted to their husbands. Does this sound like he wants somebody to submit to her? Like, no, he's a matrimonial alliance with a young and respectable female, is informed of a person ready and willing to change the state of the single blessedness for the hazardous chains of wedlock life! ! So he's saying willing to change the state of single blessedness for the hazardous chains of wedlock life, saying I know that a marriage is a risk for both of us, but I want somebody who is willing to take that risk. Yeah. Now here's the first one we got. Her appearance very attractive, a temper excitable, and a mind capable to enlighten the dark shadows of his earthly pilgrimage.
Wow, he's looking for a muse.
Yeah, he's looking for somebody. No, he's like, I want somebody who's attractive, excitable. I like excitable women too.
Yeah, I guess, someone who gets jazzed about your ideas. Yeah, you're right. I mean, not all of these are agnostic to appearance. Like the one that says desires to meet a single or widow lady of some means and of refinement and Christian, age 33 to 43, weight 125 to 145 pounds, height 5'4" to 5'7", stylish and of neat appearance but plain, which is really interesting.
So you had read another one, or?
Well, I mean, they're not agnostic to appearance.
Not all of them are.
But weight ranges, like 125 to 145 pounds, height 5'4" to 5'7". Stylish and of neat appearance, but plain.
Plain. I love it. Okay. So I asked, like, why did women do this, right? Like, women who answered the ads for wives in the West were those who weren't finding men, or men of quality at home, or those who wanted to get away from home for some reason. Reasons included having strict parents, being subject of a scandal that was ruining their reputation, or simply wanting adventure or a new start after something bad had happened at home. These women needed to find husbands elsewhere far from where they lived. Surprisingly, no shortage of women answered these mail order bride ads. Many old Western marriages were made this way. In most cases, the marriages went smoothly, as both parties represented themselves accurately. No one wanted to travel 1,000 miles or more across a continent, or wait for someone to travel that far to get to them, only to find out there were lies involved that would make the marriage unpleasant for one or both of them. Right. However, the occasional stories of mail order bride ventures went awry. And I think this is the core thing, is the reason reason why this didn't end up poorly that frequently is just because you got to live the rest of your life with this person, right? You know?
Yeah.
You're not gonna.
Lying works on a one-off, I'm never going to see you again basis. It doesn't work if you need to depend on that person the rest of your life. And your spouse, whether you're antagonistic toward them or not, they can really make your life miserable. Your life is in their hands. Your food is in their hands. Your safety is in their hands. If you are sick and vulnerable, they decide whether you live or
No,
not.
as a husband, like that's absolutely true. If you piss off your wife, she can just stab you at any time in the night. Like,
yeah, or if you're deadly ill, she could just not give you water. You know, like there are ways. You know, even without
it was
actively.
difficult. Actually, there was one serial killer woman who just like killed tons of husbands.
Yes. I think there's been multiple of them in history because it's a pretty easy game to play.
Right. One notable example, though by all means not the only one, is that of 22-year-old school mistress Elizabeth Berry and bachelor minor Louise Drybelbis.
Oh!
I know how to pronounce that name.
Yes,
that's my
not
sister-in-law's
Drybelby.
first
No,
name,
no.
but we always called her Dreebleby. I pretended I couldn't pronounce it. Lewis described himself as a lonely miner in his ad. Elizabeth was concerned about becoming a spinster since she was still unmarried at 22. I wonder if this is related to Brittany, which was approaching old age in the old Western marriage market. That is hilarious. 22 was considered approaching old age back then.
Oh dear.
So Elizabeth packed up her things after a short correspondence with Lewis and married him in California. On the way, her stagecoach was robbed, but one of the three robbers allowed her to keep her luggage, which had her wedding dress and other belongings for her new life in it. She noticed the man had a ragged scar on his hand. Later that day, she reached Lewis's house and they went to the justice of the peace to get married after she got dressed for the ceremony. After the exchange, vows were pronounced man and wife. Elizabeth thought she recognized Lewis's voice and saw the same ragged scar on his hand she had seen in the robber when he signed the marriage license. Realizing he was one of the robbers, she fled, and history does not record what became of her. It turns out Lewis was indeed a miner, but he neglected to say in his ad that he had supplemented his income by robbing stagecoaches with a couple of his friends. Okay, so on June 4th,
they didn't necessarily have their happily ever after. She just ran off.
Just ran away.
That's really dangerous because
too high status, too high. You know, women just expect you to have money without working for it.
See, that's the thing, and also, but like she's out there and she's vulnerable. I mean,
ran away into a city. You know, I don't know if she like ran. You know,
well, and if the ratio was 9-1, she could probably take her pick of the litter.
Okay, on June 4th, 1871, Sarah Baines hopped down from a wagon in Fort Bridger, a remote military and trading outpost at the crossroads of several pioneer trails in what would one day become Wyoming. Baines, a 24-year-old seamstress from Louisiana, had just spent several months traveling 1,500 miles through roadless territory alone. But she wouldn't be alone for long. She'd come to Fort Bridger to get married. The groom was Jay Hensley. Imagine that, months traveling alone as a woman in the Old West.
Unaccompanied. That is terrifying.
Because, you know, while that your husband wouldn't grape you, a bandit might, a Native American might scalp you.
They don't have any interest in maintaining your, unaccompanied. That is.
Native Americans during this period, some tribes, not all tribes, were genuinely terrifying and monstrous. They would do really horrible things. The one that you always use, you know off the top of your head, was the one that Pocahontas came from, which is not one of the tribes.
They had some torture involving burning and pulling your skin
where
off
they would pull your skin off with a clam. With clamshells. But they weren't even like the most violent Indians were generally the Plains Indians. Like this is where you had the big warlike cultures that developed during this period. And so really a scary, brave thing to do. The groom was Jay Hensley, a 48-year-old farmer who'd left Ohio some years before to seek his fortune out west. The two met after Hensley responded to an ad placed in the matrimonial pages of the October 12th, 1869 edition of Frank Leslie's Illustrated Weekly. They corresponded via letter for more than a year before. Hensley proposed the day after Brines arrived at Fort Bridger, and they were married by the fort's minister in a small ceremony on the banks of Gorosh Creek. The next day, they left to open a general store in Placerville, California.
Placerville.
Placerville. I don't know how to say it. In the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, the Hemsleys were married for 51 years.
Oh,
So here you see a few things. One, it's not like the husband is the breadwinner. They went to open a store together as soon as
yes.
and they like started their life. It wasn't like he had a store operational and then he got a wife. It was like, hey, what do you want to spend your life doing? Because we're going to be doing it together. And they go open a store together, right? And they end up married
Yeah.
for 51 years. It seems like a pretty, harmonious. And I will say, it always gets to me. We should actually do an episode that's like a realistic take on Native American pioneer interactions, because I think you have two periods. You have the one period where, in 1950s Americana, where, people naively understood it as like cowboys versus Indians, and the Indians were generally the bad guys,
Except for like the wise friend Indian.
yes, who would be a guide or whatever.
Yeah.
But then in like Wokeville, it became, settlers always bad, like Indians always good. And I think that that's also really a twisted understanding of history. And there's actually this great one where they were like, they were interviewing some like ultra progressive, and they were talking about how, before the settlers came, like the Native Americans all got along. There was never any war. There was never any torture. There was never any
First
slavery.
off, there is plenty of history of Native American tribes doing terrible things to each other.
No. They didn't believe that. They believed this narrative of like, they were like these wise, like mystic people who like didn't do that. And it's like, no, there were some tribes that were like unusually nice.
Peaceful.
Like the Cherokee would be an example of this. But, there were others like the Apache and the Comanche and the Seminoles.
They were proper scary.
Yeah, proper scary. The Seminoles don't even mind this today. They've done pretty well. They ended up buying the Hard Rock Cafe chain as a
Good
tribe.
for them.
And for people who don't know, the Seminoles were the ones who lived in the Florida like Everglades and swamp areas, and nobody really conquered them ever, and nobody wanted the land. That's an advantage.
No one wanted to be out there. Yeah, that is.
But it keeps you strong, when you live in.
That's why we're so big on city states in undesirable areas. That's actually a really great example of like, people are like, why do you want to build in the far north? Well, for the same reason the Seminoles were okay, relatively speaking, because they were in Floridian swamp zone of death.
Yeah. So here is a story that was put in a newspaper. Moffat County ranchman secures charming housekeeper.
Oh.
Married 4 hours after they first met. And this is a very old write-up. This isn't like a modern write-up. The young lady came in on the belated train something after 4 o'clock, was met by her intended husband, and before 9 the deed was done. Now it must not be imagined that the two were altogether strangers before taking this step. Miss Betts is a sister of Miss Frank LeClaire, who lived near Cal's place on the South Fork. They had been courted by mail for a couple years and recognized each other instantly when the young lady alighted from the train. R.H. Green was one of the guests of honor at the wedding, and being a mutual friend of the interested parties, aided greatly in their acquaintanceship. The bride is a charming lady who has made her home in Denver for several years. Mr. Cal is one of the enterprising young ranchmen of southeastern Moffat County and has a host of friends who will be join in wishing both much happiness. So there's a few things to note from this story. The first is that the way that this wedding was structured is they had mutual acquaintances who helped source them, which was really common.
Yeah, this really seems like a community endeavor.
Yeah, another is, which were common, they weren't always, you had some like genuine mail-in brides, but then in other instances, you had, the people being matched by their family members. But here I'd also note where she came from, right? I've mentioned that you have sort of genetic selection events when you're dealing with the West. And a lot of people think of the West as being like a single wave, when actually what it was is multiple waves. And then the most adventurous people from the last wave settling the new wave. So you have, the first wave settling in the Appalachian region, and the next wave settling out in like Texas and the West. And here, this woman who is going out to this really rural region was already settled and living in Denver.
Yeah.
Which was a very,
she was a daughter of risk takers who took an even bigger risk. Yeah. There's this magnifying effect, which is why many people argue that San Francisco has this sort of collective genetic inheritance of startup risk takers. that's what you got there.
Yeah. And it's also important to understand like how bad things were for women in these cities in terms of like what led them to go out and do this,
Um,
which was that, often jobs, if you didn't have a husband, were hard to get as a woman. You could end up in one of the like sewing factories, which
yeah, in
was
a
like
workhouse.
a
Really bad.
nightmare existence.
Yes.
God, that'd be a fun one to do an episode on, or a depressing one to do episode
Yeah.
on, the old workhouses.
Mhm.
Basically, they kept you like a slave. You'd rather be a sex slave than at one of these workhouses,
Yeah.
where they keep you working, extremely long shifts every day of the week,
In
and
very unsafe conditions.
yeah, on these giant looms. You can still go tour them and stuff like that. And that was, if you weren't from a wealthy family, or you weren't like the oldest kid from a wealthy family, this is what was waiting for you if you didn't secure a husband.
Yeah.
And well, that, or like dying on the streets, or becoming a pickpocket or a beggar or a thief, or so for a lot of these women, this was actually a very good option. Also, keep in mind that many of them were coming from like Puritan, strict households or something like that, and were having their rebellious phase, and we're like, you know what, I'd really like to, live a bit more free. And the West was significantly more gender equality than the East. Like, women in these states and territories, in the East, sometimes they weren't allowed to own property, they weren't allowed to, et cetera, et cetera. That wasn't true when they got to the West. And the arrangements that they were able to form were generally significantly more gender equal. So if you're a young woman who had a sense of adventure and wanted a degree of equality, you could find that.
Mm-hmm.
But people also like, made a little fun of this. Like, it was a little negative, like the early days of dating online. Like, I remember when we were dating online,
when you would get the side eye for dating online.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think the important thing to note is that not dating IRL, like not meeting your partner at church or in school or having them be your neighbor, is a risky endeavor, and is viewed with derision and suspicion by non-risk takers, by conformist non-risk takers.
Yep.
And that's why online dating is seen this way. This is why these mail order brides were seen this way. And yet this behavior has been actually quite common for a long time. Essentially that's how my grandmother married my grandfather. They corresponded via mail for some time after the war. They meeting in person just a few times after the war in Paris.
France. Yeah. So the Hartford Courant remarked in 1910, the Wichita Eagle reported with sardonic glee that Miss Effie Newland, one of the wealthy young women of Hoxie, Kansas, married a Mr. Lopez, a sailor of Key West, Florida, after she jokingly responded to his ad for a wife. But Lopez was a splendid writer, and the girl soon became infatuated with his lovemaking. I love it today. Lovemaking means something totally else, but they meant like being sweet in letters.
Yes. My goodness.
The paper claimed Lopez traveled to Hoxie and the couple were married while the parents protested. Other stories fueled the panic that marriages made outside society bounds were dangerous. The Los Angeles Herald reported on October 31st, 1897, that a 32-year-old man shot and killed his heavily insured 19-year-old wife, whom he met through an advertisement in a matrimonial paper. Of course, some stories had happy endings, marriages that did end well. So like one headline from 1907 declared, "Girl writes in secret and wins rich planter." The story of an Indiana woman who met her husband through an ad in matrimonial paper. The pair spent years writing to each other in secret and they married in person. This is a story from an old newspaper of something that ends poorly. Red hair balks Cupid's plans. Mail order bride forgot to ask prospective husband about it. Trip here in vain. Kentucky.
She shows up, but she's a ginge.
No, he's the ginge, and she immediately renounced their marriage possibility because he was redheaded. Because she said, "quote, I just couldn't live with a redheaded man. I couldn't. They are always so cross." It's not like she's like literally her stereotype against people with red hair.
Redheaded man.
Okay. This is a crazy tale from an old newspaper. Like, who knows how many of these old stories are true? But brother and sister drawn together through matrimonial ad. Council Bluffs, October 18th. The most remarkable romance ever brought to light in southwestern Iowa has befallen James Coopington, a prosperous farmer residing in the Nishawah Bota Bottom, 20 miles east of here. Coppington advertised for a wife and received a response from a widow in Georgia. They exchanged a number of letters, and he sent the woman money with which to come to him. They were married on the day of her arrival. He met her at the depot, and they were mutually dumbfounded when it was discovered that the intended bride was none other than Coppington's sister, from whom he had been separated at youth. He heard she was killed in a railway wreck and mourned her as dead. Each married and their respective spouses died. The sister's name being changed by marriage, Coppington did not recognize her in correspondence.
Did they get married? Did I
No,
hear that right?
married. No, they didn't.
Okay.
They were previously married, and then that's why they didn't, the name.
Okay.
Who knows if it's real? It's a sweet story if it is. Like, I want it.
I mean, yeah, at least you discovered your sibling is still out there.
Okay. So to go through some original texts, because I love reading these. This is from 1865 in the Chicago Tribune. Correspondence desired for the love of the thing, fun or matrimony. Any young ladies between 16 and 21. This was like a more flirty one, like either for marriage or just for fun.
Oh dear.
And then this is an ad for people to join like a service for doing this. Either rich, handsome, pretty, stylish, accomplished, refined, talented, or brillianted. By two gentlemen, a rich young widower, S.H. Layard, this is for two men, and a rather handsome, steady fellow, the only son of wealthy parents.
Oh,
correspondence, honorable or secret?
Honorable or secret?
This is what? These men know what's up. That is a horny marriage ad.
They're ready for something raunchy, aka secret. That is interesting.
Widow. This is from a widower, merchant, and stockman lives in Kansas, 56 years old, height 6 feet, weight 210 pounds, brunette, black hair and eyes, wishes corresponding with ladies of same age, without encumbrances and with means, must move in the best socially and be fully qualified to help make a happy home object matrimony. So he's saying, you need to be, upper, you need to, not
be classy.
Classy, right? There's a lad in Missouri with a flat foot, seeds in his pocket, a brick in his hat, a blue eyes, size 10 shoe, called the Bull of the Woods, and the boy for you.
Well, there's a lot of contemporary lingo in that one. My goodness.
Yeah,
a brick under his hat and seeds in his pocket. What on earth?
He's giving a vibe with that one. That's
he
like
is absolutely no. He's slinging it.
Tinder. Here's one. Once pretty girl, age 17 to 20. Advertiser is 29, 5 feet 9 inches tall, blonde, can laugh for 15 minutes. Wants a pretty girl.
These are tall people. Are they overstating just like people are on online dating ads now?
I wonder.
Because this is really tall. 5'9", 6 foot. Like these are very tall heights for that time period. We've seen what beds look like from that time period. This is and clothing too.
Yeah. Probably lying then. Yeah.
I doubt. Yeah. Well, at least some things never change.
Respectable young man, 20 years old, good city position, desires acquaintance of modest young lady, age 17 to 21, with home nearby, object to attend operas and church, perhaps more.
Perhaps more.
He's showing off his way. He's like, I go to operas and church, and that's what I want to do with you.
Yeah, he's
lady.
really virtue signaling.
No, but again, this is not, these are not guys who are like, I'm looking for a hot woman who can make a good dinner. Like, no one's said that, right? Like, no one's been like, Okay, here's one from 1898. 30, wealthy, lost mother for whom I sacrificed youth, dread a lonely future, seek husband and true companion. This woman is desperate. And 30 at that age was ancient. She's really looking for what she wanted.
That's rough.
This one was in 1899. Widow, 44, Southerner, stranger own home, West End, would like the hearthstone of a heart swept and the cobwebs brushed away. Matrimony. Oh, sorry, would like the hearthstone and heart swept.
Getting poetic. Okay.
Cobwebs brushed away. So he's being poetic. He's showing, whatever. Okay, here's one. Here's one. An older bachelor returning from the mines finds his old sweetheart married and old acquaintances scattered. Desires lady acquaintance. Object marriage. This from 1904. I like that. Very straight to the point. I was going to marry someone. Like, I'm not like a flirt or whatever. She just got married when I got back. This one here from 1921. Businessman, gentleman, Christian, 33 to 43 age, 125. Oh, yeah. So this is the one where you're talking about height and weight.
Very specific about weight. Yes.
And the skills he wants is music, stenography, typing, bookkeeping, good penmanship. That's interesting. Okay, here we've got here an ad for husband. I like this one. Okay, you got gold diggers even in the past. 38-year-old brunette seeks a husband with an automobile. This is from 1921.
Does she want to marry a man or a car? This is very interesting.
The cars would have been quite a new contraption back then. Like, ooh, I want one of these. Men who lives fast. Here's one from 1881. I think this one is interesting. Young person of noble birth, beautiful as Helena, housewife like Penelope, etc. Seeks a husband through press entirely without acquaintances of the masculine sex. And so what she's saying here is, look at me, I'm so educated. I'm a little, you know.
Yeah, but is she describing herself to Helen of Troy? I mean, good luck, lady.
Yes, and a wife like Penelope.
No one wants to marry a woman who thinks she's literally as beautiful as Helen of Troy. That is just trouble. I don't care how beautiful
she doesn't have any male acquaintances. Maybe she'll be.
Yeah, for a fucking reason. No one can tolerate her. I can't even deal with one collection of sentences that she wrote hundreds of years ago. Okay, almost hundreds.
So I found the first one that mentions cooking. Gentleman 35, rancher in Montana, seeks lady under 30, adept at household duties and not afraid of hard work. So he starts with the hard work thing. Must know how to cook and mend.
That's good. Yeah.
So rather than keep going, I collected some more, but this episode's run long, and I think that we get the idea of what people were looking for.
The question is, how can we bring this back? Because I like this. And I like this idea of like of looking for a business partner, hey, looking for someone who, can move out here, knows how to do these things, follows this religion.
I have a great idea.
What?
Okay, so just like the Old West, our podcast is predominantly male watched.
Yeah.
So what women can do, if you want, and you want to reach out to us and have like a like short thing at the end of an episode where we pitch you to the audience, right?
Yeah.
And we forward you correspondence. If you're looking for marriage and kids, you let us know and we'll make a pitch for
email
you at
us at partners@pragmatistfoundation.com with a succinct, like these ads, description of what you're looking for. Also, one more pitch, also for the ladies watching this. There is a society of mothers who have stepped back from, rigorous full-time careers to do more parenting, who nevertheless want to be involved in business and start businesses and kind of work together, kind of like in a writer's club, to keep each other honest and move forward and actually get those businesses started. It's called Undercurrent. If you're interested in joining this, also email us at partners@pragmatistfoundation.com. We're not running it. We're not the founders of it, but we met the founder at NatalCon, and she's a really cool woman, also a mother of a bunch of children she has a finance background, also very professional, and it's a cool group. So email us as well if you're interested in that.
Yes, but I like this idea of keep it short, simple, and what really matters to you.
Absolutely.
And I think that'll also help with personal framing, right? But
I love you recognize that our podcast is the Wild West. A lot of risk-taking, high-achieving, intelligent men and some women.
Here's a sweet one from 1883. I want a wife to talk with at day's end, someone gentle to make this lonesome place home.
Oh, I want to give him a hug, It's okay, little man. Yes, it's probably not. He probably died a very painful death.
Yes, alone. That was actually a fun one from A Thousand Ways to Die in the West. I thought that was actually a fairly funny movie with a interesting premise of a, like, I think it sold pretty wrong. Like, it sold like, all the ways you could die in the West is what makes it funny. But what makes it funny is taking somebody with modern sensibilities and values and ideas of gender roles and putting them in an Old West environment and just watching them constantly like flabbergasted at how different things were back then and how much nobody cared.
I have only the finest healing tonics and elixirs procured from the farthest corners of the globe.
Ogden's Celebrated Stomach Bitters.
Good. Look at the ingredients. Cocaine, alcohol, morphine, mercury with chalk. What the hell is mercury with chalk?
Science!
And red flannel. Red flannel? There's shirt in here?
Pieces of shirt.
Here's one that I think you'll find from 1889. Widower, 50, Texas, owns 200 acres, seeks a lady with some capital to join in matrimony and improve the land.
Oh.
Just like, look,
He
this
wants
is-
an infusion of this is this is a growth equity marriage. I'm not signing up for that. Nice try.
I love you so much, Simone. I'm glad I got you through the modern version of one of these.
I reached out to you. I'll have you know.
You did. You were the trollop, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
Sorry, you were an aggressive woman in the deed of matrimony.
My first
carnal
message to you
propositions.
was a question about your startup. Okay.
Okay. You were being sly.
And you were
with
like,
me.
let's discuss it over dinner. And I was like, okay. But no, it was always about business with us.
You
Thank
were
you.
not interested in the startup at all.
Of course I wasn't. I was interested in your stupid face. I love you too much. Oh my God, I love you too much.
Simone.
I'm really lucky I ended up with you. Just letting you know that. Sorry, I did submit it though. And it
You got it as an unlisted video. Can you send me the unlisted video just so I can check it works? The link that you sent?
I just checked that it worked and I just submitted it, so it's a little late, but sure, here's the unlisted video.
We are submitting to Andreessen Horowitz. We got to round 2 applications. They liked our pitches of both of them, both for the AI video game project and for the school. So that is so exciting. So exciting.
It is exciting. It is really exciting.
You are just an absolute star, Simone. And
You know what else is on my unlisted YouTube videos? It's insane. There's the gist of Gigaverse. There's an original, and this is 2022 description of the Collins Institute, which is crazy, from our original fundraising for it.
Wow.
And I have our Sábados con Andres spot. Andres.
We did that a lot.
When we were on Peruvian TV.
One of the top Peruvian TV shows had us on at one point. But hold on, you were on NPR today, and you were like, it was exactly like that scene from Parks and Rec. Like they had this NPR accent, and they were all like low energy.
Leslie, could one say that a book is nothing more than a painting of words, which are the notes on the tapestry of the greatest film ever sculpted?
One could say that. But should one?
And the bioethicist was like, well, of course, no one would call you a Nazi, Simone, for what you're doing. And
You're like, no one would describe that as like what the Nazis did. And I'm like, every day.
Like, progressives don't know how crazy their own party is. Like, just not even close. I thought what we're going to do for the next
He
episode.
had more eugenic views than I did because he believed that there were some things that universally everyone could agree we should screen out this. And I'm like, no, that's no.
Catholics, nope, they wouldn't agree on that.
They wouldn't agree with you. Yeah, and that's crazy. That like progressives have more eugenic views than we do, but we're the bad ones. We're evil. We're the one. Oh, sorry. Not sorry, actually.
Yeah, no, and I've been getting boiled at something because I've been watching people angry at a lot of our like friends, like the lady who was on our show, Science Lady, Sabina Hofstetter, because she championed a book that was like, hey, science is getting too woke and it's causing issues. And the guy was like, oh, how could you say that when Trump's in office? And so we're gonna rail on him. We're gonna say we won the war on science. We defeated science.
Toasty, what did you learn about picking daffodils?
I just wanted to put your flowers in the house so we can go to the store to get some blueberries.
Oh, okay. Toasty wants blueberries. We gotta go.